Hi and welcome. I am taking a look at a book by David Platt, and it's a book called Radical. Um, if you are part of the Connections team at Valley Creek Church, you know that radical is the word that God gave me for our team this year in 2011. And He validated that very quickly after by having Pastor John go into our first series, which is entitled Rooted. If you study the word radical, it actually means to root or be rooted from. So we have a wonderful year ahead of us that is going to be full of a lot of radical only God stories as we're radically obedient to Him, as we have radical abandonment to Him. I hope you'll join me in just embracing everything that God has for the Connections team at Valley Creek Church through that word. I've also invited you to join me as I do a book study through this book. And every week I'm going to be posting my thoughts on about 2 chapters at a time. And today we're going to post on chapters 1 and 2. The subtitle of this book is called Taking Back Your Faith from the American Dream. And because of that, this book is a little bit hard. It's kind of some hard content, but I believe that it is truth. We live in America where we are very self-focused and in a world, I think, of narcissism right now, and it has really taken us away from the core values and the principles of the gospel of Jesus Christ, and that's what this book is about. So I hope you'll read along with me. Again, it's Radical by David Platt. This is what it looks like. A couple of key thoughts that I picked up on in chapter 1. On page 7, he makes a statement. He's talking about his own church. He is a pastor of a church in Birmingham, Alabama. And he says this, that we, speaking of his own congregation, we're settling for a Christianity that revolves around catering to ourselves, when the central message of Christianity is actually about abandoning ourselves. So think about that. Christianity, right now, are you seeing it catering to yourself? When you think about even going to church, at our church we have 3 different services to make it convenient. We have lots of different classes to offer. We have different versions of the Bible to be reading. All of that is very convenience focused. And I think it's interesting that, as he points out, Christianity is about abandoning ourselves, taking up our cross to follow Him and leaving everything else behind. That's just the first thought that is very interesting. Let's take a look at another one. On the bottom of page 13, he makes some really bold statements here. He says that we, speaking of the Western Church, are molding Jesus into our image. He is beginning to look a lot like us because, after all, that is who we are most comfortable with. And the danger now is that when we gather in our church buildings to sing and lift up our hands in worship, we may not actually be worshiping the Jesus of the Bible. Instead, we may be worshiping ourselves. This past week in the men's Merge Bible study at our church, Pastor John Stickle made a comment, and he said, when we stop worshiping God, we start worshiping ourselves. And I remembered him making that statement, which he shared with us in leadership meeting, and I looked at this and thought, wow, am I doing that? When I sing and when I do lift my hands and when I praise Him, is it really Him in the most purest form that I am praising? It's a good thought to consider. On page 19, the first paragraph, he makes some bold statements. He says that in this book, I want to show you that with the best of intentions, we have actually turned away from Jesus. We have in many areas blindly and unknowingly embraced values and ideas that are common in our culture, but are antithetical to the gospel He taught. Here we stand amidst an American dream that's dominated by, and I get this, self-advancement, self-esteem, and self-sufficiency. Wouldn't you say that describes the American dream? It's all by individualism, materialism, and universalism. Yet I want to show you our desperate need to revisit the words of Jesus, to listen to them, to believe them, and to obey them. He goes on page 29. And he talks about some hard truths that the gospel, it reveals some eternal realities about our God that we would sometimes rather not face. And maybe this is why we fill our lives with constant entertainment in our culture and in our church. We are afraid that if we stop and really look at God in His Word, we might discover that he evokes greater awe and demands deeper worship than we are ready to give him. I will tell you that this book really did turn my world upside down, which I think is kind of funny. The house on here, if you can see the little logo, it's literally turned upside down. Uh, and God has got such a sense of humor with me. Some of you know that over the holidays we got a new puppy. We've got a new black lab. Her name is Mocha, and she's actually right there. I think you can maybe see Mocha. But what is so interesting about her, I have never had a dog that sleeps on her back. She literally will sleep on her back with all of her paws sticking straight up. Sometimes one of them will be going out of her crate. And I was reading this and looking at her just a moment ago, watching her sleep on her back, and thought that is so upside down from every other dog I have personally had. And I shut the book and I looked, and there was this upside down house. And I thought, you know, I really do believe that that's the Lord speaking personally to me, saying there's some of my ways that I, Becca, have got completely upside down. And I really want to seek him. I want to know him better, and I want to be right side up with him. So I hope that you will join me. And if you're not into reading, hey, you're more than welcome to tune in and just pick up some of the highlights and the nuggets that God speaks to me through this book. That's chapters 1 and 2. I'll see you soon, and we'll do chapters 3 and 4.